BioForge is a fascinating title during the unexplored territory days of gaming. A game with fixed camera angles and tank controls that came out after Alone in the Dark, but before Resident Evil. I wouldn't exactly call it a survival horror title, but there are many elements of the old school formula within. Back before there was a formula. It's one of those games you expect there to be an episode of Ross's Game Dungeon on. As of writing, this isn't the case. But if you're like me, you became aware of BioForge thanks to others who dusted off old games on the regular. BioForge was an ambitious title from an ambitious studio, Origin Systems. Best known for their Ultima and Wing Commander titles, BioForge goes for something different. A title well before best practices emerged in many different fields of game development. As a result, BioForge can be a bit of a choppy experience. The game pulls heavy from the trial and error elements of old school point-and-click titles. The tank controls are the clunkiest I've ever used. The combat system, while fascinating and ambitious, lacks on its execution. Still, it's a fascinating title that if you're willing to put up with its quirks, is worth checking out.
I may be dead anyway, but at least I get to send you first.
BioForge kicks off with a spaceship inbound to the Daedalus moon. A prisoner is on board, known as AP-127. This is our protagonist. We don't get a good view of them as they're taken in. On the operating table, this eccentric-looking individual begins to cut us open. We awaken some time later locked up. While we only saw an outline of who we were, it certainly wasn't this. Are we more machine than human now? What did they do to us? We beat up a nurse bot to clear our way out of the cell. There are 3 other cells here, one of them with a one-armed man. Outside a cell lies his severed arm, which we could use as a weapon. He's going on about a fork in his possession. No doubt this man has lost his marbles.
If you come from the fork, you'll be sorely disappointed.
Time for a fight to the death. It seems to take forever for him to go down from our blows. Although if he gets a strike in, he could stun lock his way to victory with little effort, even with one arm.
I pattern my life after the random looping of your entrails.
A couple of tries later, I take him down, and take that fork he was yammering about, and a logbook. We use a fork to open a door panel, opening the way forward. Our character has no idea who they are or what happened to them. Something went wrong on this base. Many people are dead or missing. We have to escape, find out what went on here, and find out who we are. Oh, and in one of the other cells, there's a flute on the ground. Our character, despite no memory of who he is, seems quite talented with it. BioForge makes use of fixed, static camera angles with tank controls. It's a title from 1995, about 3 years removed from Alone in the Dark in 1992. About a year later, in March of 1996, would see the release of the first Resident Evil. It feels more in line with Alone in the Dark with how it looks and handles. It may not look like much now, but there was some cutting-edge technology behind the scenes here. One being the animations. BioForge is one of the earliest titles to make use of real-time motion capture for animations. Ahead of the curve by several years. Even more notable was how the team built the animation system from the ground up. The 3D tools at the time weren't able to support what they needed or were out of their budget. So as one does, they built one from scratch. What's interesting to note is that they labeled BioForge as a quote-unquote interactive movie, something you see at the end of the game's credits. While it plays more like a classic survival horror title, the interactive movie label is an interesting one. Take a look at the gaming space over the last 15 years or so. Interactive movies as far as the eye can see.
I haven't done any of this, by the way.
No, this is, just so you at home know, we haven't touched the controller for 45 minutes.
This notion of unexplored territory is most prominent through BioForge's controls. Tank controls can be a bit of a barrier for some, especially the younger audience who came after tank controls fell off flavor. I have no issues with tank controls, but in BioForge, I can't think of a game off the top of my head with more clunky tank controls. Although in some ways it is fitting for our character. Here's a man with a new cybernetic body, who seems to be more machine than human. You could say he's getting used to it. How do the controls work for BioForge? It was a PC-only title. No controller. You move with the number pad on the keyboard. 8 moves forward, 4 and 6 turn us left and right, and 2 moves us backwards. Why not 5, like a WASD setup? Hitting the 5 key fires our weapon if we're carrying one. The 1 and 3 key allows us to sidestep left and right. The 7 and 9 keys move us forward, but with a turn. Holding shift allows us to move faster. Seems self-explanatory, right? Well, there are a few hiccups along the way. Before you run, you need to move first before you hold the shift key to run. You can't run from a stop. If you need to turn, our character will come to a stop. It's choppy to say the least. The thing is, there's an amusing solution to bypass this. Why am I running backward in so much of my footage? Well, it's much easier for controlling movement. You can't use the shift key to move faster backwards. That said, your backward movement speed is closer to the running speed than your forward walking speed. As well, switching directions doesn't bring you to a standstill while moving backward. This type of movement allows you to bypass how damage impacts your speed. As your health drops, we'll begin to move slower, slowing to a limp while close to death. You can bypass this by moving backward. You still move at the same speed regardless. In a way, it's like how parking is easier in reverse than driving straight in. You have more control. I already knew about this trick going in thanks to Giant Bomb. I did see their playthrough of BioForge years back. It's how I became aware of the game and one that always remained in the back of my mind. Of course, mentioning Giant Bomb feels like an obligation about my thoughts on them. I was never what I call a hardcore fan. I'd watch clip channels and listen to the occasional podcast. Their early days produced sheer gold on the regular. BioForge is one of them. You could go back and watch those clips and still have a great laugh. Of course, you can't bring up Giant Bomb without talking about the late Ryan Davis. Ryan was not part of the BioForge playthrough at Giant Bomb. They first played BioForge during an Unprofessional Friday session in April of 2013. Ryan was not present for that session. They did a playthrough for the rest of BioForge in May and June, but again, Ryan was not present. He would pass away in July of 2013. I have to wonder what he would say about BioForge. And while they would still produce great content afterwards, they were never the same after Ryan's passing. They never reached the same heights. They were fortunate getting Dan Reichert on board. His wacky hijinks and energy helped keep them alive and from getting complacent. But with splitting the office from West to East Coast, having staff like Drew and Dan leaving, I lost interest beyond the occasional clip. Things only got worse with the OG crew leaving and Jeff getting fired. Hiring some insufferable personalities didn't help matters, along with being part of an acquisition and the closing of offices. They would bring back Dan to run things, and bless his heart, but the magic is long gone. While writing the script, I went to see what they've been up to as of late. Well, a Frost-like rant from Kotaku journalist Elisa Mercante during their Summer Games Fest coverage got some attention. Yeah, it's time for someone to take this bomb out back and finally set it off. Add another tick to the list of things that Darkside feel has outlived. Giant Bomb had its time, well ahead of the Friend Simulator curve with their podcasts and video content. The OG staff seem to be doing fine with their own endeavors with generous Patreon support. Jeff Gerstmann is still a threat and will always continue to be. No one can rant like he can.
Who here isn't passionate about Shenmue?
It's a fucking bullshit forklift simulator for assholes. You people have been fucking fooled. That game was never that good. It was just a bunch of like half-assed ideas put together in a way that you had never seen before.
But back to ranting about BioForge. The combat system is one of BioForge's most fascinating elements. Ambitious, janky, with little reference to work from. The inspiration came from the combat set for Alone in the Dark and expanded upon it. You hit the C key to go into combat stance. You hold the control key for your kicks and alt for your fists. You hit the corresponding directional key for a certain attack. If you want a kick to the head, you hit the 7 or 9 key. 9 does a roundhouse kick to the head, the 7 key does a super kick to the head. 4 and 6 do body kicks, and 1 and 3 do low kicks. As mentioned earlier, the 5 key fires are weaponed. What about the back key, the 2? Well, we do a backflip, because why not? I'd love to see the motion capture sessions for this. For fists, the upper numerical keys will do roundhouses and an overhead blow. The 4 and 6 key go for a body blow. Lower keys allow for dodges and blocks. Dodge left with 1, block with 2, and dodge right with 3. It's a lot, but it's intuitive in its setup when you play. After a few minutes, I had a solid feel for what was available during combat. Its execution? Well, that's where things falter. Besides, it's not like games with tank controls are known for deep combat systems. Despite all possible options, you don't want to mess with what works. I was a fan of the roundhouse kick to the head. It either knocks them down, in which they get up, hit them again. Or if it only knocks them back, input another follow-up kick. Whatever you do, ensure that your attack hits. If it doesn't, you might as well reload and start over. All it takes is one hit from an enemy to get into a stun lock. Enemies take a long time to go down. For us, it's but a few hits before we fall. I would find myself getting frustrated and start entering further inputs, which would lead to further misses and another death. Your enemies have great lines if we are to fall to them. The same goes for us if we win.
Take all the time you need, Dr. Mastaba. Your assassin has been dealt with. That was for my men, you grotesque son of a bitch. I guess it can be hard sometimes to tell who your friends are.
I played the game on medium. If you do plan on checking out BioForge, don't feel bad if you bump the difficulty down. At the very least, save before entering combat. I applaud them for the ambition they had for this combat system. The team know that they should have given the care to its combat system that they did with animations. Something had to take a hit, and I'm not only talking our character. Again, it's not like they had much of a template or best practices to work from here. Unexplored territory resulted in experimentation. Now, I love the idea of the key layout. If you want to do something on a controller, you could have the left and right shoulder buttons for enabling kick or fists. Move the right analog stick in a given direction to use the corresponding body part. I haven't come across many other games that have a combat setup like this. I mean, beyond Alone in the Dark, none really pop to mind. Clunky? Sure, but something that adds to the charm of the BioForge experience. BioForge has a great story, although its execution is a bit choppy. There's a lot for us to read through. Logbooks and entries that could take several minutes to read. Instead of short notes spread throughout, it's large text dumps. Not only will they flesh out the world, but we'll find required access codes buried within the entries. As interesting as the world is for BioForge, these logbooks can put a damper on the game's pacing. BioForge isn't a long game. Even with all the trial and error situations, you can beat it within a couple handful of hours. With how packed these log entries are, it would be better suited for a longer game. Then again, look at the output of Origin Systems, BioForge's developer. Ultima was their bread and butter. Much longer titles than BioForge. Or look at System Shock, which Origin Systems act as a publisher the year prior. A longer title with info dumps spread throughout, including the use of audio logs. They could have cut down on the length of these logs and put more of that info into the game's supplementary reading material. BioForge came with a booklet with about 30 pages of personal files and logs to help flesh out the backstory. The days where manuals were an essential part of the gaming experience. I miss those days. Games moving to in-game tutorials to explain the mechanics are fine. But there was so much life and character that manuals could add to a game, fleshing out the world and the story. The days of the long manual are long gone. Well, I guess the manual in general. It's been a good 15-20 years at this point. Remember that guy I beat up earlier with his severed arm? The one going on about his precious fork? Seems pretty silly with a dose of black humor. Well, if you read the supplementary material on the log in the cell, it paints a tragic picture. This was Kanan, the security chief of the archaeology base here on Daedalus. The man cutting us up on the operating table during the game's intro? That's Dr. Mastaba. He's the one in charge here. He's been conducting hidden experiments and research to create the perfect assassin for the Mondites. We've been one of many test subjects. Considering how fast we could go down, I say he still has a way to go for creating the ideal assassin. Many of these test subjects came from a supply ship that came in proximity to Daedalus. Who are the Mondites? They are a quasi-religious/scientific cult spread across the galaxy. They work outside the bureaucratic heavy reticulum, the interstellar government, to advance scientific pursuit without constraints. One of their goals is to download memory and thought process of humans into a computer. Through the log files in the manual, we can see Kanan beginning to question his devotion to the Mondites and Dr. Mastaba's goals. He tries to free us from one of the prisoners found from the supply ship, but is caught. Kanan becomes one of Dr. Mastaba's many test subjects of cybernetic implants. One's making use of technology from an ancient alien race that used to live on Daedalus. The experiments had many different effects on test subjects. For Kanan, it was being driven beyond the brink of sanity. Hence the obsession with the fork and the severed arm. Rest in peace, my friend, and thanks for the arm.
I'm sorry, my friend. We are both victims, you and I.
BioForge is pretty generous with regards to guiding us forward. As we progress, our journal will update. We're notified of this with our arm lighting up and a sound effect. Think of this as the game's equivalent of Updated My Journal from Planescape Torment. Fitting as we also don't know our real name, at least at the moment. These journal entries help flesh out our character's thoughts, but also give hints of what to do next. With that, let's make our way through the game's highlights and many notable moments. BioForge is very much a game where you want to save on the regular, especially entering somewhere you haven't been before, like accessing the elevator to go to different floors. Let's try a different direction. Let's see what this computer has to say. One of these chambers contains a Cyberraptor? Yeah, you know that's going to pop up sooner or later. Opening a platform and taking the ladder down, we have a great foreboding environment and camera perspective. We hear breathing? Let's go check that out. Well, the game did give ample warning. How do we get past this monster? First, we need to drain the coolant down the shaft. Draining the coolant results in the Cyberraptor popping out for a fight. Considering it's a Cyberraptor, I was expecting a bit more fight than they gave. We open the platform to drop them down below, where they'll fight with the unseen creature. Then we release the coolant down the shaft to take them both out. And my god, what an amazing shot. What is this, some giant scorpion-like creature? No wonder it made short work of us before. We can now head down the path which the creature blocked. And here's the perfect example of always saving before entering a new area. We have 3 possible paths. One of them's a pretty obvious game over if we drop down it, but there's these 2 other openings that look similar. Let's try the one on the left. Okay, let's try the right path. Here we grab the blaster, which gives us options in moving forward. With the blaster in hand, we can now move on to what's one of my favorite bits of BioForge. We'll take the elevator to a different floor. There are several laser bots right outside. You could step out and fight, but you'll likely face death as a result. While using the elevator, there's an announcement that mentions something noteworthy.
Energy discharges in this chamber are extremely hazardous.
Let's make use of the walls to bounce our blaster shots off to hit the enemy. Well, easier said than done. This is very much a trial and error affair of changing directions and shooting. Many attempts resulted in hitting myself to much hilarity. After many tries, we could clear them out and use a nearby turret to take down an incoming ship. Progressing our way through the base, we'll return to the room where Dr. Mastaba worked on us during the game's intro. He's working on another test subject. He has full control over us. There is some hilarity to this scene with how he moves around for each given line. He moves around as robotic as we do.
I know you have many questions. Who are you? What have you become? Pursuing these questions will be the death of you.
He gives a demonstration with how much we are under his control.
This prisoner is under my control, but I do need you here to perform an experiment. Or perhaps not the right word. I need you for a demonstration.
But Dane, the man on the operating table, destroys the device that gave Dr. Mastaba control over us. When we awaken, Dr. Mastaba is nowhere to be found. Dane begs for us to put him out of his misery, which I do. I'll play a tune for you and the guard in your memory. So what's up with this flute? Well, this room has several logs to read through. Dr. Mastaba's logs go into great detail about his experimentation, including the explanation about the flute. As a child, his mother was an orchestral flutist. He implanted several of her favorite pieces into the implants he was experimenting with. If the subject could play the flute, it was a sign that they had been successful in wiping their past memories. The most interesting log we could find here is the list of test subjects Mastaba experimented on. Somewhere in this long list of test subjects is us, but we can't access all the data at the moment. That said, we can eliminate several of these subjects as possibilities. Some are dead, some are women. Still, not enough information at the moment to make the right conclusion. The room next door has even more logs. One is the writings of the leader of the Mondites. Another lengthy log comes from Dr. Escher, a key character that we'll run into shortly. Her entries are about the archaeological findings on Daedalus. They made many incredible discoveries of an ancient alien civilization known as the Fix. Although these Mondite and Escher entries would have been better suited for the manual. It's a bit straining on the eyes after a while. I do love how we could see our reflection on the monitors for these entries though. There's a nearby elevator down that takes us to a small ship, but it needs a new battery. There is a mysterious alien cube nearby that we'll want to pick up. We now need to deal with the reactor core. To reach it, we'll acquire a new suit with more protection. The This also disguises us from a guard with a blaster. He thinks we're a fellow Mondite. I'll be taking that blaster from him. Plus, I could get the drop on him as he's not aware. Well, that was the idea.
I guess we Mondites aren't one big happy family after all. I
must tell Dr. Lestava. This one needs work.
And now there's a turret blocking our way to the reactor. I love the overlaid explosion effects here, although our blaster doesn't seem to put a dent in this turret. We need to shove it off the ledge with a piece of machinery. Now we could access the reactor to prevent a meltdown. Of course, this is no easy trip. The warning alarm will sound familiar to anyone who has played Deus Ex. And this isn't the only case where BioForge will remind me of Deus Ex. There's an alien creature standing in our way. Shooting it over and over or fighting it does nothing. There's not enough time to fight before the reactor melts down, which results in quite the explosion upon failure. After flipping a couple of switches, the alien creature books it across the light bridge we used to reach this area. I'll turn it off as we cross upon return. What we need to do is flip it on him as he crosses. Easier said than done. You'll need to lure him over, with a very small window for error. Several attempts resulted in him crossing the light bridge before I could turn it off. BioForge is merciless in what it throws your way, but victory is oh so sweet when you succeed. Heading to outside the base, there are platforms we need to navigate across. Can I backflip across that gap? Nope. Is there a switch we need to raise platforms? Nuh-uh. I end up running around without direction for a while before looking at a guide. This alien cube we found earlier, it gives us power to traverse these gaps. It looks like we're using an invisible zip line. We'll come across the ship we gunned down earlier. The captain still lives. Like everyone else, he'll make short work of us if we end up in a stun lock. Well, this time I have a blaster in hand, so let's put that to good use. I shoot him over, and over, and over, and over. You'd think point blank range with a blaster would do the trick. It doesn't. But it does make for an easy stun. Then hit him with your fists or feet. Once again, there's a little room for error in BioForge. This is most evident in the game's next stretch. There's a door that won't open. Next to the down gunship, we can find a bomb to blow it open. Our protagonist shows a bit more urgency in this tone with the bomb compared to J.C. Denton.
A bomb.
We need to make our way all the way back to that door with the bomb in hand, plant it, and get out of the way. This includes traversing across gaps with our alien cube. We have about 80 seconds to do so. Well, not exactly. Once we reach a certain point, the timer will switch to around 20 seconds. It doesn't matter how fast we were prior. Several planting attempts failed. I could get the bomb down by the door, but had no time to get away. Looking up a playthrough, I noticed they shot down the laser bots in the area. So I do that, and for whatever reason, they gave us more time with the bomb while planting. That captain we fought in the down ship, he drops a much better gun. A much bigger gun. One that makes short work of these laser bots.
A big gun.
So now when I drop the bomb by the door, the timer pops up on screen, showing more time than before. Although backing up wasn't fast enough. You also want to hit that escape key right away after the timer pops up, else you lose precious time to escape. But at long last, several attempts later, I did it. Earlier we picked up a walkie-talkie with a woman on the other line, although we couldn't talk back. This is Dr. Escher, a key character mentioned from the many logs we found earlier.
Does anybody read me? Help me, please. Somebody.
Mastaba shot her and she's on her dying breaths. We can give her a medkit we found in the dropship, but it's not enough. I press space with the flute in hand to pay my respects. She gives us a translator device to use at the nearby alien temple. BioForge has plenty of great environments, but this temple stands out amongst the rest. Using the translator, we can decipher writings from over 100,000 years ago. This comes from the Fix, the ancient alien race that used to live on Daedalus. The writings will tell us about their culture, their wars and conflicts with one another, and their master learners. Remember that alien we dropped into the abyss while crossing that light bridge? Well, that wasn't enough to stop them. They're back for a rematch. Once again, ensure your hits land or they'll stun lock you into defeat. After enough hits dealt to him, he'll run away. I mean, if that fall didn't stop him, what will? To pursue him, we need to obtain an item by solving this puzzle. I do enjoy the puzzles throughout BioForge, alien yet a sense of familiarity. Things don't grind to a halt with these puzzles, but it can take a bit of time to solve them, to work them out. Here, we're rotating the colors of the bottom square to match the top. The composer is going nuts with the drums here. With the alien artifact in hand, we can now travel through these chutes. To access the other chutes, we need to input the patterns above each chute into the central console, something that once again feels alien yet familiar once you work out the logic. And once again, here's another great showing of why you want to save before entering a new room in BioForge. Of the 3 other chutes, we can only access 2 of them at the moment. Let's try this one first. Okay, let's try the other one, the zero gravity room. We need to use our gun to propel us to the other chute. Although what would happen if you didn't bring a gun here? I guess you'd be stuck. Then again, I don't know why you wouldn't keep the gun on you at this point. Once again, our alien rival shows up. This time he throws up a shield. Blaster shots bounce right off. But there are loose panels on the floor, so I'm thinking, lure him over the loose panel and he'll fall through. But no matter how I tried, he wouldn't move over the loose panel. It turns out the solution is to simply fight them to the death. The shield doesn't negate the damage we deal with our fists or kicks. So what was the point of the loose panels then? That said, it led to one of the most bizarre yet hilarious moments in BioForge. We could use the translator device Dr. Escher gave us to decipher the writings from the fix in this room. While reading, I heard sound of a panel loosening. That's odd. Oh come on, BioForge, you're punishing me for reading too slow? With our alien rival at last finally vanquished, we can use the device to throw up the barrier on ourselves and progress to the next room. I love this next puzzle about needing to fill out this grid. Once again, alien yet familiar. The moves alternate on the grid. One move is in the given direction, next will be in the opposite. So as I'm solving this, I'm going forward, backward, to make sure I don't screw up. Solving this, an alien creature emerges from a ship and begins to float over towards us. We can't move for a time or do anything, but right before he floats over, we can resume movement. So by natural instinct, I fire at him and kill him with one shot. Well, that was disappointing.
Pathetic creature. I could destroy 100 like you.
Well, it turns out he's Jen of the Fix, their first master learner. Over 100,000 years old. If you let him approach, he'll talk to us. He'll tell us what to do next.
Peace upon you, brother. I am speaking to you now with my mind. I am Master Learner Jin of the Fix. I am not your enemy.
Time for us to escape, but first we need to clear out some debris. Remember that chute I entered earlier resulting in an instant death? Well, now we're good to enter it. He gives us a new battery to power that ship we came across earlier. Mastaba sends Marines after us, but we can clear them out with some surveillance shenanigans. To clear out the space debris, we need to rotate these 6 panels to line up these symbols on the wall. There are a few hurdles tossed our way, like the debris hurtling toward us. These can be tough to get a read on. Are they going to bend and curve past us or right into us? Stepping on some of the panels will result in 2 symbols rotating, but it's easy enough to figure out, so let's line up these symbols. Okay, these did line up. Am I missing something? Some symbols aren't available to line up as all 6. Thing is, there is a couple of them that look near identical, so it did take a few tries to get right, along with restarting due to flying debris hitting me. And for whatever reason, while recording footage with NVIDIA's Shadowplay from this point onward, the save file names changed. When I'd saved footage before, it'd be under the name DOSBox. Now, Wolfenstein 3D. Not sure how or why, but something to note. As well, the green recording dot showed up for this last stretch if you're wondering what that is. All things considered, DOSBox cooperated with my playthrough, along with gathering footage. With the debris cleared, we can now make our way off this rock. It doesn't have much time left before it explodes. Time to head back to that ship that we came across earlier. There are some Marines on the way back, but we can run past most of them. The shield of ours bounces their shots right off. Mastaba escapes on a ship to fight another day.
What a disappointment you are. One more failed experiment. When the reactor goes critical, you and this entire base will be disposed of. And soon, I shall begin my work again on my next test subject. Your friend, Dr. Escher. Farewell.
One thing you'll want to pick up is the logbook Dr. Escher left behind when she died. There's a code within that gives access to restricted information about the test subjects in the room where Mastaba experimented on us. With this information, we can find out our identity. For my playthrough, it was Blake Rathman. According to the wiki, our identity is either random or varies depending on our actions. For example, we could put Dana as misery like I did earlier, or decide not to. This will help determine who we are. Same thing goes for using a healing item on Dr. Escher or deciding not to. The only thing left now is to power up the ship and escape. A couple of other ships from the Fix join us. The one Jen emerged from when he came to chat with us. Now I know his body lay on the ground after our fight, but I like to think our alien rival is on one of those ships. We didn't kill him and he'll come back to fight us again in the sequel. I never thought I'd make a Family Guy reference in my videos, but he could be like the series equivalent of the chicken Peter fights with. But this is where the BioForge series ends. Now there were plans for more. A sequel began development, but put on the shelf. Instead, an expansion pack, BioForge Plus, began development, one that continued right after the first game. The team had 9 weeks to put something together. They had a beta ready in 10. It would never see the light of day. A key executive behind the project left Origin, resulting in the cancellation of all his projects. That said, there was a leak of its intro cutscene, one which follows our character after the events of the first game, where he comes across what looks to be a derelict ship in which he lands on. What would be on there? Only those who worked on the expansion know. I couldn't find any further information on it. What would happen with Origin systems? I haven't mentioned it yet, but they fell under the EA umbrella in 1992. Well, you know how it is with EA, who get in their way on the regular moving forward. Still, they lasted a good 12 years before EA shut them down in February 2004. One of the earlier victims of studios killed off by EA. While writing the script, BioWare and EA Studio unveiled their trailer and gameplay of the next Dragon Age title. Reception was negative to say the least. I'm still gobsmacked after Mass Effect Andromeda and Anthem that EA hasn't taken them out back. I'm not expecting much from this upcoming title, and if that doesn't kill them off, I don't know what will. Is BioWare the dark side feel equivalent of EA's portfolio of studios? All in all, BioForge is a fascinating game, one well ahead of its time. This was during the unexplored territory days of gaming, well before best practices began to emerge across many different areas of game development. They didn't have much of a template to work with, so there are many elements that are awkward and choppy. But despite all that, there is much within BioForge that makes it a great experience if you're a fan of old school survival horror. While I wouldn't exactly call it a survival horror game, it does have several elements of the old school formula. I would love to see someone take cues from its combat system and use elsewhere, because there are a few games like it on that front. If you love to explore games from the DOS era and are a fan of what I cover on this channel, consider checking out BioForge. It plays nicely with modern systems via DOSBox. It will take some time to get used to its approach, but one that's worth it. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support the channel further, do consider becoming a patron or a YouTube member. You'll get access to videos like this earlier, you'll be featured in the forthcoming credits, and you'll get periodic updates.